Good afternoon. It is 6:00 p.m. on Tuesday, February the 8th, 2022. I'd like to call the meeting of the Peoria City Council to order. I'd also like to welcome everyone in our City Council audience, as well as Brady Johnson and our listening audience at WCBU. I'd also like to welcome the audience watching via cable channel 22. Yes, please. Clerk, the council mics are open. Can you please call the roll?
Mayor Ali.
Here.
Councilmember Allen.
Present.
Councilmember Sear.
Here.
Councilmember Graham.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson.
Here.
Councilmember Jensen.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly.
Here.
Councilmember Euler. Councilmember Riggenbach.
Here.
Councilmember Reckriegel.
Present.
And Councilmember Velpula.
Present.
We have a quorum present, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Please join me and stand for a moment of silent prayer or silent reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, Madam Clerk.
We have two notices that need to be read for tonight as it relates to COVID-19 and to the township electors.
Okay. I have one for the township electors.
We don't have a COVID. I apologize. It's only for the township electors.
Okay. This is a notice to our township electors pursuant to Public Act 095-0761. If you desire to have an item considered on the agenda at the annual town meeting to be held on Tuesday, April 12th, 2022 at 6:00 p.m., you are required to bring a specific request signed by 15 or more electors to the clerk no later than Tuesday, March 1st. Any group of registered voters may request an advisory question of public policy for consideration by the electors at the annual meeting by giving written notice of the specific advisory question to the township clerk in the same manner as required for an agenda item under subsection B of section 30-10 of the Township Code. Madam Clerk.
We are at proclamations.
I have one proclamation to read tonight. I'm not sure our guests are here. Okay. The proclamation is to the Society of Women Engineers. Whereas the Society of Women Engineers, SWE, founded in 1950, is a nonprofit educational and service organization that is the driving force that established engineering as a highly desirable career aspiration for women. And whereas the Central Illinois section, comprised of 220 members, has focused on outreach, professional development, advocacy, and work-life integration for the past 30 years. And whereas the Central Illinois section of SWE will partner with the Peoria Riverfront Museum to host National Engineers Week from February the 20th through the 26th. Several professional societies will also participate by organizing and facilitating virtual events. And whereas SWE empowers women to succeed and advance in their aspirations while receiving recognition and credit for their life-changing contributions and achievements as engineers and leaders in our community. Now therefore I, Rita Ali, Mayor of the City of Peoria, Illinois, do hereby proclaim February the 20th through the 26th, 2022 as National Engineers Week in Peoria, Illinois. Thank you for the work of the Society of Women Engineers. Madam Clerk,
We are at the minutes.
Councilman Euler,
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move to approve the minutes of the City Council meeting held on January 25th, 2022, and the special City Council meeting held on February 1st, 2022, as printed.
seconded by Councilmember Allen. Any questions, comments? Please cast your ballots. Not on? Can you say it out loud?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
We are at public hearings. 22-043 is a public hearing regarding the redistricting of council districts as proposed by the Committee of the Whole, and we need a motion to open the public hearing.
Can I get a motion to open? Councilmember Riggenbach, seconded by Councilmember Jackson. Please cast your ballots.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Anyone like to speak to the public hearing regarding the redistricting of council districts as proposed by the Committee of the Whole? Come forward, please. Give us your name, Mr. Conrad. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mayor Ali. Good evening, members of the Peoria City Council. My name is Conrad Stennett. I reside at 1027 North Underhill Street in Peoria, Illinois, in the West Bluff. I'm here tonight speaking to you on behalf of the West Bluff Council, an organization composed of the 8 great West Bluff neighborhood associations, Bradley University, and the Main Street Merchants Association. I come here on behalf of the West Bluff Council and also of the neighborhoods of the West Bluff. Our policy, our longtime policy on redistricting, is simple but effective. Our neighborhoods stay together in one district, preferably our current district, District 2. Looking at your map, it doesn't fit that bill. I was looking at the splitting the Moss Bradley neighborhood, a historic district, into 2 districts. I find that unpalatable. The county may have messed up in that regard, but I was hoping that the city would do better. I think gerrymandering the West Bluff neighborhoods is a bad idea. We are a successful community of interest. We have good synergy with each other in our neighborhoods, good synergy with Bradley University, and a wonderful business corridor. Our business district is moving forward. We're a diverse area of many people of various races, ethnicities, generations. Do we agree all the time? No. But I think we do agree that the West Bluff is a special place and should be maintained. Great strides have been made over the last decade since we last talked about redistricting. We've moved forward our neighborhood, our business community. We have problems. Problems are being solved. Things are moving forward. We are a model of what I think Peoria could be. We should be encouraged, and I hope we do. The West Bluff isn't broken, and I don't see any repairs imminent through this gerrymandering solution. It's not good for the West Bluff, the city, frankly, for its leaders. A couple of options to consider. One, a special census. I think that particularly in the Bradley off-campus area, we did not get a complete and accurate count, and that may be an issue as well. I hope you'll seriously consider exploring that. Map 1. Frankly, I think that's the best one. There are areas of our community who, frankly, could do with an immediate change of district representation. I think some communities would be welcoming that. Changing the number of districts is something we should consider for the future. I'd really like to consider a commission to put together a proposal, a strategic plan on how to take us from our current configuration to a new one in 10 years. Robert Heinlein, the science fiction writer, once said, sometimes it's better not to appeal to a person's humanity, but to their self-interest. I feel it's important to let you know that in the last redistricting process, the last council member who attempted to gerrymander the West Bluff was voted out in the next election. And that was an attempt. I'd argue that there's passion, and I think that a cloud would fall upon those, particularly those who represent us, in pursuing a solution that we do not want. So I hope that you will strongly consider another solution. I suggest map 1. Our neighborhoods should stay together in one district, preferably the current one. I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Stinnett. Is there someone else that would like to speak to the public hearing regarding redistricting of council districts as proposed by the Committee of the Whole? Come forward, please. Yes. Please give us your name.
Good evening, Council. My name is Joanne Bannon. I'm a lifelong Peorian. I live at 1705 West Moss, currently in the 2nd District, and I'm here tonight with Shari Wynn, who is the Moss Bradley Residential Association newly elected president, We do not have formal comments to share. We just would like to have the council hear some concerns that we have about the speed with which this decision was made and whether or not keeping the West Bluff intact is something that you're really committed to. We understand that, and I give just huge kudos to the staff who spent many, many hours putting all the variations together, but it seems to me, at least, that it's rushed. And I'm not aware of anything that is so pressing that it couldn't explore, as Conrad pointed out, a special count or a re-look at the effects that we would have of breaking up. Moss Bradley, as far as I know, is the oldest continuous residential association in the city, and we're very close. Next year we'll be celebrating our 50th anniversary. So I would just ask that the council consider all the options before proceeding in a hurry, what seems to be a hurry, without a lot of consideration of some other options. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dannon. Yes, sir.
I'm James Hinchey, president of the Uplands Residential Association, and I want to echo our support for the comments that Conrad made, as well as Moss Bradley. You know, the West Bluff should remain as an intact, cohesive organization. These districts should reflect the general character, should have some homogeneity in it, their character and how they're matched up. Of all the maps that are presented so far, the 2 series are, in my view, the most problematic. You're taking districts along the river and matching them up with as far as communities up in Northmore, off Northmore, north of War Memorial. And it's hard to reconcile how those communities can find common ground in their representatives. And while I'm sure our representatives will do their best to represent everyone in their districts, the experiences, the needs, and of those from the north to the south are going to be very different. I went a step further and I looked at voter turnout information, for this version 2.3 map, and it is deeply concerning when you take precincts along the river, below the bluff, and patch them up with precincts to the far north. It confirms, I guess, a natural public bias that, areas that are wealthier and less diverse tend to vote more readily. And so the voter turnouts of areas, the farther north you go, tend to be higher. And, today, the first district has a solid representative that, does their best to represent all the interests of those below the bluffs. With these version 2 series, the first district is going to be fractured and paired up with communities to the far north who are simply going to have the capacity to outvote them in many different ways. And I think we can do better. I think we can do maps that keep the West Bluff as a whole, that can do best to keep other communities as a whole. And I think this council should revisit and explore other options. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the public hearing regarding the redistricting of council districts as proposed by the Committee of the Whole? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, are there any communications that were sent regarding redistricting?
I had received 4 comments regarding redistricting.
Can you read those, please?
The first one is from Gibb and Mary Russell. After looking at the new district maps, we were really disappointed we have been placed in a District 2 map and removed from District 4. Our Westwood Association is very active in things going on in our district, giving support to many issues. We have been in District 4 for years and have been to all the monthly meetings at Paneras with Montalongo and now Allen. These meetings are centrally located and very informative with different speakers, and they will be missed. We hope these maps will be discussed further before they are approved. The District 2 seems much smaller, but spread out across the city. We feel even though the District 4 is larger, it is better to keep each district in a central location as each part of the city has different issues. The second comment is from Adam Lontai. As the representative of the Arbor District to the West Bluff Council, I pose my displeasure with the Redistricting Plan 2.3 version 2. As do the representatives of the other neighborhoods that comprise the WBC, we believe the WBC neighborhoods should be kept in one geographic council district. The next comment is from H. Wayne Wilson. I urge you to discard the suggested version 2.3 that places the Moss-Bradley Neighborhood Association in 2 different districts and remove the uplands from District 2. Residents of the Bradley University area, including MBRA and the uplands, have similar interests in strong neighborhood associations working toward common goals. I live in the adjoining High Wine Historic District and do not actively participate in those organizations' activities, but I do follow their efforts, which have been important in keeping those older neighborhoods strong. The last comment that I had received in my office is from Kathy Robinson, President of the University East Neighborhood Association. We concur that the 2nd District remains as is. We support the unified West Bluff period, and we are about keeping our community together. It is this: the City of Peoria is experiencing a current crisis of trust in our leadership decision-making abilities. Too many decisions are made behind closed doors and lack public transparency. There is low trust in the environment created by poverty traps. We would like to see more conversations, concerns, and actions about family mobility, education, public housing, and deal with the unfair blight, forgotten, and marginalized area of the south side of Peoria, Illinois. We need our representation aligned with the common areas that are being represented. We need to see renewal infrastructures up and running. and the fossilization of our city's economy. We need to focus on bringing in big corporations to our city and be mavericks for the welfare of our city. And that concludes the public comments that I received in my office.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and thank you to everyone who has provided input, provided feedback to this process. At this point, I need a motion to close the public hearing. Moved by Councilmember Riggenbach, seconded by Councilmember Valpula. Any questions, comments? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Seer?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
We will have one town item. 22-44 is a request from the town officials to approve the January 2022 actual expenditures and to approve the February 2022 anticipated expenditures for the town of the city of Peoria.
Councilmember Graham?
Mayor Lee, I move to approve as outlined.
Seconded by Councilmember Jackson. Any questions or comments? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Seer? Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
We are at the consent agenda. 22-45 is a communication from the mayor and corporation council with a request to approve the declaration of local state of emergency. 22-46 is a communication from the city manager and director of public works with a request to accept the low bid of J.C. Dillon, Inc. and award a contract in an amount not to exceed $1 million from the base bid of $1,196,405.08 for the storm drainage repair annual contract for 2022. 22-47 is a communication with a request to approve an agreement with the Peoria Citizens Committee for Economic Opportunity for $150,000 in South Village TIF funds for the rehabilitation of owner-occupied homes in the South Village TIF area. (22-33) is a communication with a request for the following. A, adopt an ordinance amending Chapter 1 of the Code of the City of Peoria related to the amendment of various sidewalk regulations. And B, adopt an ordinance amending Chapter 26 of the Code of the City of Peoria related to the amendment of various sidewalk regulations. 22-48 is a communication from the city manager and finance director comptroller with a request to adopt an ordinance partially abating the tax heretofore levied to pay special service area property taxes on the Peoria Sports Center Special Service Area in the amount of $223,210. 22-49 is a communication with a request to adopt an ordinance partially abating the tax heretofore levied to pay the special service area property taxes on the Holiday Inn Property Tax Special Service Area in the amount of $16,200. 22-50 is a communication with a request to adopt an ordinance providing for the issuance of general obligation bonds not to exceed $17 million of the City of Peoria, Peoria County, Illinois, for the purpose of financing certain capital improvements within the city and refunding certain outstanding bonds of the city, providing for the levy and collection of a direct annual tax for the payment of the principal of and interest on said bonds, and authorizing the sale of said bonds to the purchaser thereof. 22-51 is a communication with a request to adopt an ordinance appointing a new bond registrar and paying agent for certain outstanding obligations of the City of Peoria, Peoria County, Illinois. 22-52 is a communication with a request to adopt an ordinance abating the tax heretofore levied to pay principal of and interest on general obligation corporate purpose bonds of the City of Peoria, Peoria County, Illinois, 2009 Series A, and the partial abatement of taxes levied to pay principal and interest on 2016 Series A general obligation bonds in the amount of $199,872. 22-53 is an appointment by Mayor Ali to the Tri-County River Valley Development Authority with a request to concur of Patrick Urick. 22-54 is to approve the committee report policy session from the January 18th, 2022 special city council meeting regarding redistricting council districts. And that concludes our consent agenda.
Thank you. Are there any items to remove from consent? Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 22045, please.
Okay. Councilmember Velpula?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 22050.
Any other items? Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda moved by Councilmember Sears, seconded by Councilmember Reckriegel? Any other questions, comments? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Sear?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-45 is a communication from the Mayor and Corporation Council with a request to approve the declaration of a local state of emergency.
Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to ask our Corporation Council, have any of the extraordinary powers in the ordinance been used since the onset of COVID?
Thank you, Councilman. And first, I'd like to note that when we submitted the council communication, we did not yet have the date that the governor's emergency declaration would be extended to. That date is now March 5th. As to the powers that are listed in this particular one, implementing COVID protocols for city facilities.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't ask my question fully. Powers that are listed that would not be legal without the declaration of emergency.
The first one I can think of that I would comment on would be number 2, that in order for our boards and commissions to meet remotely under the Open Meetings Act, it requires both a disaster declaration from the governor as well as the mayor's approval to conduct those. So unless that approval was given, then no, our boards and commissions could not meet remotely.
Okay, and that's it as far as these powers are concerned, or have been. I'm sorry to spring this on you. I didn't talk to you about it before, so that's my fault.
No, thank you. I will say that we have, with this local state of emergency, we have had some staffing adjustments to what would otherwise be employees subject to collective bargaining agreements that have had more remote work opportunity or some changes to their schedule because of COVID protocols that without this agreement would have been more difficult to implement with the various bargaining units.
Thank you very much.
I apologize. Those are the only 2 examples I can think of quickly off the top of my head.
That's fine. Thank you very much. And Madam Mayor, I move for approval.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Jensen. Any other comments, questions? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Sear? Aye. Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-50 is a communication with a request to adopt an ordinance providing for the issuance of general obligation bonds not to exceed $17 million of the City of Peoria, Peoria County, Illinois, for the purpose of financing certain capital improvements within the city and refunding certain outstanding bonds of the city providing for the levy and collection of a direct annual tax for the payment of the principal of and interest on said bonds, and authorizing the sale of said bonds to the purchaser thereof.
Councilmember Velpula?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to ask Director Crotty a couple questions. I mean, we had a meeting this afternoon, but my question is, so I see there are two financial services that we are following, Spear and Mesero, right? So what is our current, who are we following now?
So Spear Financial is the city's financial advisors that work with us on when it's best to enter the market and to work with the underwriters in the market to actually work through any issuances. The ordinance in front of you also has us working with Mesero Financial, who would serve as the underwriters on this issuance, because we will be doing a direct placement debt for this refunding.
Again, one other question is the Fed is going to, we know that Fed is going to change the rates 4 times this year. So when are we going to lock in our interest rate? I see it's at 3%. But again, where are we at this moment? Are we going to wait till we see the first? Or
Yeah, so this issuance is partial new money that was included in the 2022 budget, as well as the refunding of our 2016A debt service. The 2016A debt service is an interesting investment vehicle. It is a variable rate debt, so it does move on a weekly basis based off of market conditions. So as of right now, we're in the 3% area. The move to refund this is really looking at that hedge on future interest rate hikes, as well as just general costs increasing in the municipal bond market.
thank you so much. I move to approve this, Madam Mayor.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Allen. And do you have a question too? Okay. Moved and seconded, and Councilmember Seer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few questions for Mr. Manager and the Director of Finance. First question, can this request be split? Because we're looking at a refund for 2016 and new money that was actually approved in the budget. Why these two items combined?
The rationale behind combining both is to work on economies of scale on our pricing associated with the debt issuance. Obviously, there are fixed costs anytime you enter the market, and doing both of these at the same time does save the city of Peoria money.
Can a old bond can only be repaid with a new bond, or can we be looking at other revenues to pay the bond? And the reason I'm asking is because our Mr. Manager was very good in the last couple of years in our budget to find all kinds of different financing available, and one of them was a couple of years ago we got new money from the state that was a lot cheaper than the 5.5 that we're looking at right now. Is these type of funding still available, or do we have to refund a bond with a bond?
This is the best and most prudent approach that we would recommend for these dollars right now, absent if the council wanted to pay cash out of reserves to do that. So we just, as we've gone forward, we've just gone forward under the premise that wasn't an option that council wanted to consider at this point in time, because that would have to come out of the general funds reserves. So this is the most cost-effective way to capture that interest rate savings on not only the 2016As that Director Crotty talked about, but also the new money that's there as well that we need, that council approved in the budget, the $10.8 million of new spending.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, and thank you, Mr. Crotty, for this report you sent me today, the combined debt schedule. I want to make sure that we all know, especially our constituent, that really the next 7 years or so we'll be spending about 18 to 19 million every year just to repay our debt service. And year 8 or so after that, which I don't know if any of us will be here, but it'll go down by 50%. We're going to go from 18 to 19 million dollars to 8, 9, 10 million dollars. And to me, that is very important. because this is the main reason, Madam Mayor, where I voted no. I don't want to reopen the discussion on the budget tonight. That's not what I want to do. But I just want to make sure that all our constituent and my colleagues are aware that one of the reasons I voted no for the budget, and it was 8-3 vote, is the fact that we went from $204 million budget to $255 million budget, and with a 27 or 23.5 million for the first year. It was 47 million total for 2 years from the Fed. But I just don't believe that we needed an extra $10 million to accomplish what we wanted to accomplish. I believe that none of us manage our personal money the way we're managing our constituents' money right now, or our taxpayers' money. And I was totally, again, and our Mr. Manager knows that I have discussion with him the last 5 years. I just don't believe in borrowing money to have a true balanced budget. So I don't have a motion tonight, but my discussion was just to bring the fact that, again, I just don't believe in borrowing money to have a balanced budget. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Manager, through last year, we got IML projections and then actual money. That each time we got those projections, there was going to be more money coming in that had been anticipated previous to that time. Always some very nice surprises. And this $10 million borrowing was included in the budget that we approved. Since that budget was approved, have we received, or are we slated to receive, more money than we knew at that time?
Well, if you recall, as we were discussing pension funding, we came back to you in November and said that our finances had improved at that point. And in the last 2 months since November, it has continued to improve. So we've seen the numbers have continued to show strong revenue growth. We had a ratings call with S&P just this past week, and that was discussed with them, that we saw that our revenues continue to be strong. And that's something that I think is very positive for us. But it is state shared revenues. It is personal property replacement tax is probably the largest, and it's probably the most volatile, because it's really a reflection of what corporate income taxes are doing in our community. So we can't necessarily bank on that, and we didn't bank on it as we made our budget projections into 2022. We've pulled those back and dialed those back down in order to try and be conservative.
But we have received, and perhaps we anticipate, I don't know about anticipating, but we have received, since we approved the budget, more money than we thought. And do you have a number, an approximate number, on that differential from that differential?
And Director, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we had said when we put the budget together that we were anticipating about $12 million of surplus, and that number is probably going to be closer to $17 million in the general fund. So that's very strong in terms of what we're looking at. So.
Okay, so since we approved $12 million, I have nothing against $17 million, but I do have a problem with borrowing if we don't need to borrow. If we have $5 million more than we thought we would at budget time, why not reduce our new borrowing from $10 million down to $5 million, taking into account the fact that we've got $5 million more than we had budgeted?
Well, one of the reasons that we don't recommend that is because most of the money in the general fund is set aside for operations. It's for paying salaries. It's for paying for positions that we have, the labor-intensive side of the operations. The debt service that we do, and we do use general fund dollars to pay for debt service as well. But as Councilman Sear mentioned, we're on a path. Just 3 years ago, we were spending more than $21 million in debt service. We're down to around $18 million. We've been reducing that number down, which allows us to use those funds either to go into reserves or to go to pay for operations. We still feel this is a prudent course for us to go forward with. While I agree with Councilman Sear 100% that we don't spend at the city like we spend at our households, we also spend for generational issues here, and that's where you're investing in infrastructure, you're investing in long-term capital needs that you have that you need to look at. And so that's the reason why we're looking at this, and that we feel that this is the best approach to take.
Mr. Manager, I have no doubt that the proposal is prudent. I'm not arguing that. What I am saying, though, is that I think we have room here to reduce this borrowing by $5 million at least this year. And so, Madam Mayor, I'd like to make an amended motion to change the borrowing out of this item, 22050, to $5 million from the suggested $10 million.
So that would be a substitute motion, is that right? The motion was made by Councilman Valpila and seconded somewhere.
It would be an amended motion. It's just the amount that he's amending instead of a totally different motion.
Madam Mayor, in this instance, I would respectfully disagree with the clerk. I think because the rates and amortization schedules that would come with the bond ordinance would be more complicated than simply just amending the amount down. An entirely new bond ordinance would have to be presented and worked out with our company before that could be represented back to council. So I believe that should be a substitute motion.
Would be a substitute.
In that case, Madam Mayor, I would withdraw that and ask for a deferral until our next regular meeting. And if we could have at that time two motions or to choose from.
Okay. Is there a second for that deferral? Is there a second to defer? Okay, no second. We have a motion on the floor to approve the item 22050. Is there anyone else that wants to speak to that item? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Sear?
No.
Okay. Councilmember Jackson, need your vote.
Could I get just a repeat of what we were voting on?
Yes, Madam Clerk?
It is 22-050.
The original?
Yes, it is the original motion.
Okay.
Motion passes with 3 nays, Sear, Kelly, and Ruckriegel.
We are at first readings. 22-055 is a communication from the City Manager and Director of Human Resources with a request to receive and file a first reading of an ordinance approving the whistleblower protections policy.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to actually turn the floor over to our Corporation Counsel to explain the rationale behind this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think at this point we're all familiar with the Safety Act, which made multiple changes to the legality and operations of different items within our police department last year. One of the lesser-known items in that act was actually an amendment to the Illinois Public Officer Prohibited Activities Act, which now requires every municipality in Illinois to have a policy that involves retaliation against a whistleblower. For clarification, this policy is directed at and required to be provided to employees. This is not a policy that the general public could avail themselves of. We are required to have this for employees. So if they witness any type of wrongdoing among public officials, then they can make that report to our auditing official, who we have designated to be the HR director, under the complaint procedures that you see attached here. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Questions from council? I get a motion to receive and file. Moved by Councilmember Graham, seconded by Councilmember Kelly. Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Seer? Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
We are at regular business. 22-056 is a communication from the City Manager and Economic Development Department with a request for the following. A, adopt an ordinance to designate the University War Plan area. B, adopt an ordinance to approve the University War Redevelopment Plan and Project. And C, adopt an ordinance authorizing tax increment financing for the University War Redevelopment Project area. And we need separate motions on each.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is the proposed War Memorial University TIF. This encompasses the area of War Memorial Drive, University, Florence Avenue, and Parish. So this area encompasses roughly about 11.5 acres. It does not include the McDonald's on University. This would be the establishment of a tax increment financing district. And just a quick primer on tax increment financing districts. Any new property taxes that are generated from the development will generate what happens when you adopt the tax increment financing district is that the taxes at the current level today are frozen. So what the taxing bodies would receive is that same dollar amount that they receive today. But then any growth in assessed value and then a growth in property taxes goes in to create the increment to help to spur the redevelopment of this area. So the developers can then use that additional property tax for some of the redevelopment expenses, including land acquisition, construction, reconstruction. So all of those aspects can be utilized as part of that public improvements. So for example, this property that we're talking about is somewhat landlocked because of the War Memorial Drive and the access off of a state highway. And so this would provide potentially the opportunity to create that access off of War Memorial Drive somehow for this development to occur. So those are the types of expenses that can be utilized under the TIF Act. It's a 23-year period of time, so that would be the period of time in which this would be established. This has gone to our joint review board of all of the taxing bodies. They have reviewed it. They have understood that we were moving forward with this, and there were, I think, a couple of abstentions, but that's really only that everyone else agreed with going forward with this. And then we had the hearing at our last city council meeting where that public hearing was held. We had no comments on the tax increment financing district. And as this is laid out, this creates the area. So you see the boundary that's designated for the TIF areas in the packet. There is then the redevelopment plan, which is laid out in here. I think there's an estimate of $11.6 million in expenses that are anticipated to be redevelopment expenses that are anticipated on this site. And then there is the actual ordinance which creates the TIF. So that's A, B, and C for you. And we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Councilmember Euler?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Move to approve item A.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Ruckriegel. Councilmember Ruckriegel?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Fully supportive of this, and I think that any of us who have spent any time in Peoria and driven by this corner knows how long this corner was available for development. And I think everybody was shocked to see how much work it actually took to be able to get this particular parcels into an area or condition that could actually be developed. And I think we have a great plan in front of us here. There's been a lot of legwork to get us to this point. I'm fully supportive of this, and I think that this is probably an opportune time to be able to use an instrument like this, that we have the power to it, and we see firsthand, I think, the difference it'll make over the next couple of years. So just some comments there.
Thank you. Councilmember Jensen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have some questions about this and a few concerns. This is the first TIF that has come forward for us to approve in the 9 years that I've been on the city council. And I've always been at the position I would be more favorable towards TIFs if we were providing a carve-out for the Peoria Public School District. Now, it doesn't appear to me that there is any such carve-out. I understand that the act now, and it may have been amended, allows for, there is a formula for repayment of fees if there is an increased demand in services, if there's some residential development, which I think is contemplated since there is mixed-use development. So I'm curious about any discussions that we've had with the school district. I don't think this has been publicized that well. I haven't heard much public input or public comment. I know there was probably a hearing before a council meeting that nobody appeared at.
That's correct. There was a hearing. We did have this posted at our joint review board. Representatives of all the taxing bodies were there. I do believe that the school district abstained from taking a position at that meeting, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to think, and I apologize for that. But I believe that they are aware of the TIF. They are aware of what the plan would be with this, and I think that we did not have any specific conversations with the school district about carving out any of the TIF increment to be going towards any specific taxing bodies. That's not something we contemplated as part of this.
Okay, because that does concern me. I know in the past, and this is now years ago, probably 15 years ago, when our school district was facing real significant financial problems, a lot of it, some members of the board and the public blamed on the TIFs and not getting any of that tax revenue from, the warehouse TIF and the downtown TIF. So I do have some hesitation in supporting this. I do understand that this is a corner that does need some development, and we haven't gotten very far without this. So I am torn. Another question that I have, is it contiguous to any other current TIFs?
No.
So it couldn't be extended, at least unless we adopt another one?
No.
Okay. And then was there any other opportunity for public input other than the hearing that was before this body, I think maybe a month ago?
Well, I think that when we originally opened up and presented to the city council the decision to hire the consultant to do this, there was an opportunity for the public to weigh in at that point in time. We also had, and as I said, we publicized the joint review board meetings of all of those taxing bodies, so that's a public meeting as well. So there were opportunities where those public meetings were available for the public to weigh in on those as well.
What were the other taxing bodies that, I know you said a couple abstained and then others approved. Could you tell us specifically?
So I think the Park District and the school district were the two that abstained. The county, the city, the library board, the township, the Greater Peoria Mass Transit District, and the Airport Authority would have all been approved, would have all voted for it.
Okay, thank you.
More questions?
No, that's
Okay.
all.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just preface my remarks by saying I've never been much of a fan of TIFs. I don't think high taxes are good for development. I think low taxes are good for development. But Mr. Manager, you said that the assessment is frozen at the time that the TIF is initiated. And this has been the story since 1978 with our first TIF in Southtown. And every time the city would report to the newspaper on how all our TIFs are doing, every single time the base assessment was lower than the time before. And the other taxing bodies got less revenue out of this. Just to make that clear, this is going to pass, I'm sure. My preference, as you might guess, tends to be tax abatement, which is available for only 10 years, and this is 25. But what tax abatement can do is if things work well and the land value goes up, all the taxing bodies get more money. So I'll be voting against it. I may be the Lone Ranger on this, but for some reason, we have some calculus that I suppose is legal where the base assessed value keeps dropping through the life of these TIFs. And this happened in Southtown, this happened in Campus Town, this happened in all the TIFs up until the last report that came out in the Journal Star, which was about 9 years ago, I think. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. And Mr. Manager, you said the duration is 23 years, right?
Statutorily, this is a 23, a TIF district is established for 23 years and then can only be extended by an act of the legislature for an additional 12.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Regenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. TIFs are always a hot button, and as Councilwoman Jensen said, we haven't had one, established one, at least in the 9 years that she's been around, and I think the last one that I recall being actively involved in was the East Village Grow Salt TIF, which I think by most accounts would be considered a success. It helped spur the development of the Jump Trading Center, and it has put over $500,000 into the residential homeowners of the East Bluff through the housing rehab program. And in that TIF, we specifically have earmarked money once the increment in the fund gets to a certain level that we will help support vocational job training with Peoria Public Schools. So there's always creative ways to do that even without a specific carve out. So that would definitely be something I think worth a discussion. But as I look at this area, I think the public has spoken loud and clear that they want that area developed. I think we've all gotten emails and questions from people. What's going in there? Why isn't anything going in there? And as I look over at Gary Sandberg's old seat, he'd probably be fuming at this discussion right now, but I think we can justify this as a clearly needed economic development tool to redevelop one of the prime locations in the city. So admittedly, there's questions that we're going to continue to answer as the process moves forward, but I will be supporting this tonight.
Thank you,
Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilmember Graham?
This is a very difficult tract of land to develop. All you have to do is look at the topography there, traffic patterns. It passes the but-for test. And that's right. My constituents have been asking me, when is something going to happen there? They also ask about when is something going to happen at Sheridan and War Drive. And they're delighted to see the OSF Ergo Care there. So we've partially answered that. But, counselors, if you take a look at our city, the area on University Street from Forest Hill up to Ward Drive garners an awful lot of sales tax money for us. But, in spite of all that, because of some of the problems to develop this southeast corner of the intersection, it is sat fallow, generating nothing for anybody for years, at least as long as I've had the 2nd District seat, which is 9 years, as Councilor Jensen pointed out. It was a car dealer. It had areas where it needed to have some remediation, where there was oil, etc. It's very difficult to get development there. Now, across the street, when the Golden Corral closed, we had medical offices moving in there right away. It was not a difficult lift at all, and there may be more coming. So we must continue the vibrancy of this stretch and get this parcel developed. I think the TIF meets the but-for test. And I agree totally with Councilor Ruckriegel, who framed this at the beginning, that we should adopt this ordinance tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Ruckriegel?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. City Manager, just quick question, and I think I know the answers to this, actually. I'm pretty sure I do, but just I think for our public as well. While the TIF affects the property tax, any sales tax that is incurred on these properties, the city, the county, actually the school district, because they have a portion of sales tax that goes back into the school system, all do go to those governing entities, correct?
That is correct.
So for 23 years, this could be paying at least increases into those coffers in some capacity.
That's correct.
And for how many years has it been vacant? At least for the most part of it.
Well, I would go back to what Councilman Graham said. It's at least been eight years or so that it's been vacant. So yeah, it's been a while.
Thank you. And I think it's important for the public to know that these are contributing in other ways and other revenue pieces as this comes through. And I don't let it be forgotten that Councilmember Greb, when this conversation first started, I think had a lot of neighborhood meetings, a lot of input. This has been discussed pretty heavily across the board from start to finish, and we shouldn't forget to thank you for your leadership in getting public comment done there and meeting with neighbors as this process was going through. So, thank you.
Welcome. Okay, seeing no more lights on, there's a motion made by Councilmember Euler, seconded by Councilmember Ruckriegel, related to item A. Correct? Okay. Please cast your ballots.
Yes.
Motion passes with 1 nay. Kelly. Councilmember Euler,
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Move to approve item B.
seconded by Councilmember Ruckriegel. Any questions, comments? Please cast your ballots. Councilman Seer?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Councilmember Euler,
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move to approve item C.
seconded by Councilmember Ruckriegel. Any other comments, questions? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Seer?
Yes.
Motion passes with 1 nay. Kelly? Thank you, Madam Clerk.
We are at unfinished business. 22-039 is a communication from the City Manager and Director of Community Development with a request to concur with a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to adopt an ordinance approving a special use in a Class R2 single-family residential district for a short-term rental for the property located at 5918 North Elm Lane, Peoria, Illinois.
Councilmember Riggenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the request of the petitioner, now the former property owner, he would request that this request be withdrawn.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Jensen. Any other comments, questions? Please cast your ballots. Councilman Seer? Yes. Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Is there any other unfinished business? I do want to ask, related to council, related to redistricting, when the new district maps would actually take effect.
Thank you. We plan to have an ordinance ready for the map to be adopted at the next meeting on February 22nd. And then after that, we can determine a date that they will be effective. Occasionally, it's done effective immediately. Occasionally, it's done 30 days out. We're suggesting that we make them effective about 2 weeks after the meeting.
Okay, so it wouldn't be 2025 that they would take effect. It would be this year?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Councilmember Jensen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I hope that the council will take the input that we received here this evening on the proposed new district map and some of the emails and other input we've had and reconsider the proposed 2.3. As I indicated in the meeting last week, I had real concerns about it. My preference was version 1, which kept the West Bluff mainly intact and Moss Bradley. I don't think this map is going to be beneficial for the city. If you look at it, there's the potential that every district council person that's eventually elected could be north of War Memorial. There could be no district representative on this council that lives south of War Memorial. That, to me, is a problem. We need to make sure that the heart of our city, the older neighborhoods, have representation. We're lucky right now in this council, at least 3 of the at-large council members, including myself, live in the older part of the city. But when I joined this council 9 years ago, and then when I was elected, in 2015, I was the only at-large council person who lives south of War Memorial Drive. It is important that these districts are set up in a way that we ensure that the district, there's at least 1 or 2 district representatives that live in the older part of the city. As I've indicated before and as we've heard, I think it's very important that we keep the West Bluff together in one district. So I hope, and I will request that staff come back with another proposal. And I hope the rest of the council will support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Jensen. And just for clarification, I'm looking at the proposed map, and District 1 falls below War Memorial. Is that correct, Manager?
Yes, that is correct. It's below I-74.
I just wanted that clarified. Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Riggenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Corporation Counsel, would you please clarify what you just said? Because I think there's some misunderstanding that as the 3rd District Councilman, I represent and I will continue to represent the area that elected me last year until 2025, correct?
Councilman, I want to double check the statute and come back to you because I think, unfortunately, I don't have it at my fingertips, and I don't want to add to the confusion. So we will get that information out there as soon as we have the chance to check.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know that the council was waiting with bated breath for a report on housing or rental housing versus the landlord registration program. The manager has informed me that it will not be ready tonight. It's not ready tonight, but it will be at the next council meeting.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Very welcome. Is that you mean the presentation on housing for the homeless, or no? Something different?
No, Madam Mayor, it's the report I wanted on how landlord registration has worked for problem housing in Peoria.
Okay, I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other unfinished business? Councilmember Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just had a question. Since we have received comments tonight and concerns, we've got this schedule still that we have outlined, whereby I'm assuming we can go back and have further discussion. I would prefer that we would take comments into consideration, and before we officially make a decision in terms of voting on redistricting. I'm assuming that's what we're going to do. Is that?
We're not voting on
not tonight, right? But what I'm getting at is, will we have another special council session to have further discussion?
We don't have one scheduled. We have.
So this is moot. This is moot that I'm looking at. I know we made some decision, or we voted last week, but what I'm saying is we've had a hearing tonight, we've had concerns raised, et cetera. What I'm wondering is if we could just, before we rush, just kind of sit back and digest what's been said, and maybe have one more special session.
So the council at the last meeting decided to basically eliminate the remaining special meetings that were set aside, and to have a special hearing tonight, and then to put it on the agenda for the 22nd, which will be the next regular meeting. So unless there's, council preference to do something different by action, then that's what the plan is. That's what the current plan is.
Yes.
Do you want to make a motion for something different?
Is it possible to make a motion to change that? Because like I said, we did get some public comment tonight. I've had a chance since we met last week, to reevaluate the 2.3 map, and I did have a few concerns with regards to after getting some clarification with regards to a couple of items. Landmarks. District 1 would, under the 2.3 configuration, would lose 2 landmarks that have been in the area, but they, and I as a representative of District 1, which is always seen City Hall and the Civic Center as part of this district, I would like to see them remain in the district. It would have no impact on population whatsoever. So this is why I'm saying maybe we could make a motion to have another session.
So are you proposing a motion to meet next week as scheduled, as previously scheduled?
If that's not a problem, yes. Yes.
So Councilwoman Jackson is proposing that we retain special meeting or
Yes.
resume a special meeting for next Tuesday. And seconded by Councilwoman Jackson. Sorry, Jackson. Those J's now, I'm with the J's. Jensen, yes. A light is on by Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we owe it to the public to reconsider our proposal. I mean, the map that we ended up approving last week, we received at 3:30 in the afternoon before the policy session at 6 o'clock. The public was unaware of it unless they were tuning in at the meeting so they didn't even have an opportunity to give input on it. We didn't even get a chance to really analyze it. You know, I did make comments during that meeting that I preferred a different map, version number 1. I know the mayor and others were against that for some other reasons. So based on now the input that we've given, we led the public to believe that they would be able to give input, that we would be meeting until March 29th in policy sessions to consider these maps. I think it's only fair that we at least meet one more time after having the hearing, receiving public input here and via email and by phone calls. So I hope that a majority of the council will approve Councilor Jackson's motion to have a policy session next week to consider this redistricting. It's a big move. You know, we only do it every 10 years. So I do think we owe it to our citizens to give this some time and some thorough review. Thank you.
Thank you. And there's some more comments and questions coming. I do have one clarification, Mr. Manager. If there was another meeting that resulted in any change or modification to the proposed 2.3 map, would that then call for another public hearing?
I don't think that there's any, and I would defer to the Corporation Council, there's anything in the statute that requires us to have a public hearing. We did that out of the sake of trying to be open and allowing the public to weigh in on the proposed map. So if that's council's desire to go that same route, to say we'll have another public hearing if there's modifications, and then that's certainly we can do that from the direction of council saying that's the route they'd like to go.
So that would be optional?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, everybody wants to talk. Councilmember Riggenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think perhaps we're undermining our own process here. Last week, we said we were going to have a public hearing and then bring the map to a vote on the 22nd. I think if there's now all of a sudden there's newfound dissatisfaction with the map, next week, the 22nd would be the time to discuss it. I think it would be extremely inappropriate for us to schedule another meeting now after we've outlined the process. We have rules of order. I mean, it's quite simple. We can, if you don't like it, vote against it in 2 weeks. That's the time. We had the public meeting, the public hearing now, so we could get that, digest it, and then in 2 weeks, we will have a full-blown discussion on the map. And that would be, in my opinion, the appropriate time to send it back to the committee of the whole or to vote it up or down. So I cannot support this motion that's coming on the fly tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilmember Euler?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. After a great deal of work by our staff, deliberation by the council, several adjustments and versions put before us, the council unanimously voted 11-0 to decide the path forward here and to have the meeting tonight and to take final action at the next meeting. So I will be voting no on this motion. I agree with Councilmember Riggenbach that we set out a path and we need to adhere to our path. If it's voted down next meeting, then we can have a discussion on reevaluation from there. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, as a rookie counselor going through this experience, it's been very eye-opening, to say the least. But I do think, though, that we do need to take the time to make sure we get it right. I had a constituent meeting yesterday, virtually, in my district, and there was many people, when I showed what the proposed map that we voted on, when I showed them, that was their first time seeing it. And although we try our best to be transparent and promote it on various channels, sometimes people still just don't see things. And so we've got another opportunity to hear some feedback today, continue to keep pushing the maps out. I'm okay. I mean, I'll cut my Valentine's Day plans a little early next Monday to meet with you all next Tuesday. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Councilmember Rodrigo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I'm a little shocked at what we're discussing here tonight because we passed a map, not 10-1, not 9-2, but 11-0. It was unanimous. We had great discussion. And we've had some great conversation, I think we probably all have with citizens, not only at the public here, but as we're out in the neighborhoods, and we've gotten a lot of really good feedback. We've got nothing new that has been really added to be able to extend a conversation. And I love the way that there are certain council people that say, well, they didn't know about it on issues that they may not think have had enough of sway one way or the other, when on the issues that go a certain way, evidently the public is fully aware of it. There has been more discussion about this redistricting, more news on social media, newspapers, and I've had a lot of people contact me, and I think everybody around this council has. And now to hear that, well, we've got landmark properties that may not be in my district. In 1876, this building was in Ward 2. So there are boundaries that change, but every one of us is representing the full city. We may be elected by different bodies, but we represent the city of Peoria. I've got neighbors who are going to be possibly in a different district, and they've told me that they'll wake up the next morning and nothing really changes because they've got great council district representation at all 11 people around the council. And so I'm not quite for sure which problem we're trying to solve here, because just like the people that we evidently have heard from along the way, I've also heard a lot of things that understand all of the inputs we had. Do I think it is the map that we all would love to be able to say that we could do if we only had one input about keeping certain districts together? However, our population shifted. Work on this map should not have started a couple of months ago. The work on this map should have been done 10 years ago and 20 years ago to keep the shifting from happening. This is a result of that work. Now, we can continue having great representation, or we can divide this city and say, you know what, you're going to get lesser of representation if you're in one district versus the other. It continues the bad conversation. And now all of a sudden, because of a building, and might I say, two buildings I think that are in question, one is City Hall and one is the Civic Center. And the Civic Center is always going to be attached to the Père Marquette by a walkway. So when we start playing with these maps too funkily, all of a sudden, people really question what we're here and why we're doing what we're doing. At the last meeting, we voted 11-1. And people who were following that realized we were going to be taking this to the public meeting today. We had how many comments? 7, I believe. And out of our full city. And those were 7 important comments. And I think that we have heard those, and we will consider those for the next meeting when we will be voting on this map. But to now tell people we're we're not happy with the process. For those who have thought that this is the process, who followed the meeting last time, and who understand that this is the process, goes against what we're doing. We're elected to make decisions. We're not elected to be able to keep having meeting after meeting after meeting because we didn't get what we liked or we didn't look at the maps prior to that meeting. We asked some great questions the last one. And I think for us to muddy this water again, let's vote it up, let's vote it down. That's what we're here for, and that would happen 2 weeks from today. It's what we told the public we would do.
Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to say that I think it's rather impossible to to please everyone. As a couple of the council people have said, we had a process. It was an open process. It was a public process. We followed the process. We were finished more quickly than we thought we'd be, but we followed the process. As you know, the other comments I think are that we had a unanimous vote. People walked out seemingly happy. I think it's disingenuous to to change this. You're never going to get a map that satisfies people. The first district has to come up above above the bluff. It has to. It doesn't have enough people. I just feel it's a little late. We've heard these things. We've taken them into account. We've done the best we could. And I'll be voting against the motion. I understand, but I'll be voting against the motion. We all voted for it before. Thank you.
Councilmember Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, let me just reiterate. I am not opposed to going with what we've decided on, but I would like to say, as we move forward to do something that we only do possibly maybe every 10 years, that we not rush. I understand that it's a process. I just don't feel like we should do it tonight because we've heard from people. I've gotten calls today. I've gotten emails today from people who said, you know, what's going on? What's your position? What's going on? So I'm just saying that, you know, we are not going to, I'm not suggesting that we reinvent the wheel, but just not rush because this process is one that we have to take seriously. And regardless of where District 1 lands up, I will represent everybody to the best of my ability. I just say that we should we've got this schedule here. Just like I agree with Councilwoman Jensen, you're given the map and then a few hours later, you're expected to make decisions on it. It's just good to be able to digest it, look it over again. We had smaller maps when we started this process, and the boundaries and some of the streets were not clear, and it was really difficult to decipher just where everything was. So now that we've had an opportunity to talk about it, some of the veteran council members have brought out points about boundaries, reconfiguring where the districts, where the major thoroughfares exist, made the process a little bit easier to understand. So now we've got a chance to do that. We can go back and look at it, take into consideration all of what we've voted on and heard tonight, and just move forward. Let the chips fall where they may. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Councilmember Greb?
Well, I think that makes the case to discuss the map, which has some supporters and some detractors, at our next regularly scheduled meeting. and vote it up or down. That's all. But if you vote it down, then I think it's incumbent upon you to advance a better map that meets the criteria so we don't have an illegal map. That's the way we should do this. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilmember Jensen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I do want to point out the process that we made public was that we would be meeting at least 4 more times on this. We only met twice. And the map that we adopted, we got it less than 3 hours before a meeting and before the public got to see it. And we also said that we would take their input into consideration. And tonight and the week leading up to it is when we've gotten the most input. So again, I think the fair thing to do, this is a big decision. We only do it once every 10 years, is to have at least 1 more policy session and to really look at what it means and what our options are. So I hope the council will support it. This doesn't have to be rushed. We still have plenty of time. Thank you.
You're welcome. And just to clarify, we scheduled meetings out through March, but we scheduled those meetings just in case we needed to continue additional meetings until we got some resolution. So we had hoped that we didn't have to go all the way till March. And so that's why the meetings are set, that the meetings were set and scheduled throughout March, but we weren't obligated to continue all of those meetings. Councilmember Riggenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And again, to quote my colleague, not to beat a dead horse, but I really think it's imperative that we follow our own procedures and rules and the process that we set up. If you have problems with the map, please vote against it in 2 weeks, but do not hijack the process now and change it. We shouldn't even be discussing this tonight. It was a public hearing for us to hear the public input, and the agenda item is scheduled for the 22nd. That's where this debate should be happening. If it's the will of the council at that time to take it back to another policy session, so be it. But let's not prematurely prejudice ourselves as to what needs to be done. The rules were very clear. We made it so clear last week with that 11-0 vote that this would be coming for public hearing and final approval in 2 weeks. Vote against it in 2 weeks, but please do not change the rules in the middle of the game. Thank you.
Welcome. Councilmember Rodrigo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I couldn't say it better, Councilmember Riggenbach. It was 11-0 to advance this schedule and the map. It didn't mean that anybody couldn't change their decision and vote against the map. What it was to have the public hearing today, and in 2 weeks, we would vote on the map. And it's interesting because I've gotten some emails, and I'm sure you have too, because you've been copied on them, which weren't so nice and pretty derogatory as to why certain people wanted to be in certain areas and not in others. As we are the people who are elected to do this. We put the process into place. It doesn't mean you have to vote for the map, but we are the ones who said at the last meeting, 11-0. It was not 10-1. It wasn't 9-2. None of these issues about needing more time or not putting it forward through the public hearing and a vote on the 22nd occurred at that point. It seems like all of a sudden, now we're having a little bit of remorse, but there's no decision made. The 22nd is the time to either vote the map up, vote the map down. If it gets voted down, then we go back to work. It actually makes a lot more sense that way. Thank you.
You're welcome. And let me just say, Councilwoman Jackson, I respect your request. I don't think that it was inappropriate for you to make it under unfinished business. I think it was appropriate. Yet, if I thought that another meeting would change the course of action, I could support the motion, but I honestly don't think that another meeting would change the course of action. Right now, we have it scheduled for the next regular meeting, which is the 22nd of February. And at that time, I think we can hear any additional concerns, any recommended changes, modifications. But again, I just don't think that tonight scheduling another meeting for next week will change the direction. So based on that, I'm going to vote no. Any other comments, questions? Please cast your ballots. Motion fails with, oh, I'm sorry. Yes. No. Thank you. Thank you for that. Motion fails with 8 nays. 3 yeas, Jackson, Jensen, and Velpula. Is there any other unfinished business? Madam Clerk?
We are at new business.
Is there any new business? Councilmember Rodrigo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I don't know exactly how this would be done, but City Manager Urick, often at this time of year we talk about sidewalks, businesses, snow removal, and I've got to say that if anybody's driving up Knoxville today, this is many days after the storm, you'll notice huge sections where we're having people walk in the streets of Knoxville because the sidewalks, the businesses are not cleaned. There's been no attempt to clean them. And this is not the only one. I happen to see members of the Postal Department who were having to walk out in the middle of streets in front of businesses. And wondering on our communication to businesses, because I think our businesses are wanting to be partners with us, and if we don't mention it to them, it sometimes gets forgotten. What was our communication to our businesses in preparation of these storms and to be able to communicate that prior? And is there any way that we can have an idea of how well we did as a city? Because and then how well we can get this communication out. I happen to see bus stops that had no snow removal in front of them, that there is snow all around them, that people are waiting up in the heavy snow because of what the street has pushed, the snow plows have pushed into it, and they're in front of businesses that have not touched sidewalks, and we've got people who are putting themselves literally in danger. And I was able to capture some pictures today, but we've got a lot of people who, I know we talked about this forever, but can we somehow quantify and have a plan so that we can at least communicate with our businesses to ask for their help on this?
Director Powers, are you still in conference room 404? Can you come to the microphone?
Yes, Mr. Manager.
Could you, in response to Councilman Rodrigo's statement, could you talk a little bit about what efforts we made prior to the events, and then kind of your observations today about how we can take this going forward?
Certainly. Prior to the storm, probably leading up to it 3 days, we did highlight, and even highlighted within the snow brief, if you recall, the responsibilities for commercial businesses relative to sidewalks, and messaged it leading up to this storm. And notwithstanding this storm, and if you will think back to the first and the characteristics of this storm, meaning 10 plus inches and with blowing probably in excess of a foot of snow in some places. And that snow has to go somewhere. And the varying responsibilities across the board, whereas CityLink is responsible for clearing that snow, and we realize that the snow is passed back and forth, probably more so in this storm than any you may have recalled in the last 10 years. Because as we're plowing streets, it's not only going in sidewalks, it's going into driveways, it's going into bus stops, it's going anywhere that we could find refuge. And if you look at the Central Business District, we're actually trucking it away and putting it in a melting site. This is an age-old problem. It's one that we understand, but given the resources we have, the only thing that we can do, to Councilor Rodrigo's point, is simply, oh, I'm sorry, I meant to say Rigamac, sorry, is to message the point better and ensure that the commercial businesses, I guess, become a better citizen, if you will, or neighbor, which is the same thing we say within the residential districts. And that was the message that we put forth several times. Just be a good neighbor, because we are limited in what we are doing trying to keep the driving public safe and what we're trying to do downtown and throughout the city.
Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to give a big shout out to our Public Works Department. I've received a number of positive emails and actually some good feedback at my constituent meeting last night, and so we really appreciate your hard work. I had a constituent whose mailbox was the victim of the plow, and I contacted Assistant Director Maroon, and next day they went out there and they reinstalled a mailbox for it. So, you know, a lot of good things came. I know that there were some concerns. You know, certain neighborhoods felt that they didn't get plowed soon enough, and we worked through those as we always will. But I just want to give a kudos to our public works staff and everything that they're doing. And then just also like a plea to citizens. I know there's some concerns with citizens not being able to move their cars. I don't know if maybe their cars aren't working. I know these are some troubling financial times, but we have to really work on getting the cars off the street, because it makes it really difficult for our streets to be plowed the best way they can. So I think we definitely need to see a little bit more enforcement, maybe some warnings, you know, putting some tickets on some cars, just even if it's a warning, just to say, hey, you know, we know that your car is not working. It hasn't moved in about 3 months, because that is, you know, causing a hindrance on our snow removal process. So again, big shout out to Public Works. We appreciate everything you do. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilmember Graham?
Director Powers, I would like to echo the positive comments that were made. I will say that it is much more challenging to tell the residents who are in our tightly packed older neighborhoods that they have to get their cars off the streets than in a suburban neighborhood where some of you are residing. That being said, I think we had excellent compliance. I get people calling saying, why don't they tow these cars? And then people saying, well, what am I going to do with the car? I can't get it into the alley to get it into my garage. And then how long before we get into the alleys to get the car out of the garage, and so on and so forth. So yes, A+, Director Powers, but one thing I want to ask, do you ever regret that 17 versus 22 snow route decision when we were deliberating the budget in November? Councilor Jensen said, we have the money, why not 22? And I think the answer was there just wasn't time to prepare for service delivery for 22 routes, because I'm looking forward to a better response. I know that what we were reduced to doing with only 17 routes, and I have the yellow Public Works truck on my desk now, was we had a Dunkirk approach, basically. Conrad Stinnett, who is here tonight, masters in history, he would appreciate that. We had all these private contractors coming out to help the city of Peoria because we just didn't have the firepower for a historic storm. My gosh, this was unbelievable. We were just lucky we didn't get the freezing rain to any significant extent this time. But I think this is something, Director, we should consider going forward in terms of the budget, whether we want to get those 5 routes back for 22 so we don't have to rely so much on private contractors. And I'm asking what the director's thought is on that.
Well, thank you, Counselor. Obviously, what director would deny more resources or decline more resources? But the deputy director at the time, when he was posed with that question, it was a matter of the timing was the challenge that we were having in hiring drivers. We were in the season, basically the snow fight was imminent, and trying to onboard the people, the amount of equipment, and what it would have taken. It was a matter of timing, not a matter of desire. So I guess I would like to clear up that point because I was there. And I know what his response was intended to mean, that he would have been challenged to change the routes because to familiarize the staff with routes. We have a lot of new staff because of the effects of the ERI, which we all remember. So again, I just want to make sure that we frame that question the right way. But yes, of course we would. But I would also say that with a caveat that I don't believe the outcome in this particular storm, and we've talked about storm characteristics before, just in this year, because of the amount of snow, because of the sheer amount of snow that fell over the time frame that it fell, I don't believe that the number of routes being 21, which is what I believe it was previously, versus 17 would have made a difference of us asking for assistance or outside assistance through a contractor. We were simply overwhelmed in a short period of time by, again, a large amount of snow and falling temperatures. So in this instance, in this particular storm, I believe we would have approached it the same way.
Well,
So
our
just
men
to
and
be
women
clear.
who work for Public Works delivered, and I've said it over and over and over again. Manager, you're probably tired of hearing me say it, but Public Works is public safety, and we don't have adequate resources. And this is what animated Councilor Jensen to ask the question. If we don't have adequate resources to deal with these big storms that come through our city, whether it's a spring storm, summer storm, fall storm, winter storm, people can lose their lives just as readily as they could from an errant bullet. So I just say to you, Director Powers, I'm going to give you an A+. I think the men and women of the Public Works Department deserve an A+. Most of my constituents are happy. Heck, I told some people who live in the North Florence, Bigelow area, we never are able to go curb to curb over there because they might nick up your curbs. Oh, but they can do that. Oh, Councilman, here they come. Thank you so much. And so they went back down the street again, and they went basically from curb, well, it might be a boulevard, to a sidewalk, and really cleaned it up nicely. So I'm just asking the questions to be sure the council knows that you have the resources you need to protect the public for storms in the future and for budgets in the future.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilmember Sear?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question for Manager Urick. I'm receiving some emails and text messages today about from a lot of the bar owners about gaming machines, which I believe the annual fee per machine is $250, I believe, right now. Mm-hmm. They're calling me very upset or send me messages. Is that correct that there's going to be, at the state level, there's going to be an increase of $500 per machine? And if it's true, what will happen to our revenues?
I'm not aware of the state. The state did have some legislation that they acted on back in the fall about video gaming, but let me look into it. I don't believe that it would affect a home rule municipality, but let me look into that and get your report back.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're very welcome. Any other new business? Madam Clerk?
We are at citizens' opportunity to address the City Council.
Okay. First, we have Brian Fox Ellis. Mr. Ellis?
Yes, I'm Brian Fox Ellis. I was resident of Peoria for more than 20 years. And I moved here in large part because of the Spirit of Peoria. It's recently been announced that the Spirit of Peoria has sold. And when the city sold the boat to Bud Greaves, I've not read the contract, but my understanding is that there was a clause that the city had right of first refusal. And I would believe that clause was put there so the Spirit of Peoria could stay in Peoria. The buyer has not been announced. It's a non-disclosure contract, except that it would move the Spirit of Peoria somewhere on the Mississippi River. And so this evening, we're beginning a conversation that you will need to look at the contract. You'll need to look at your options. You'll need to figure out what is best for Peoria. And quite honestly, there's three choices that I see One would be to just rubber stamp the sale and let the Spirit of Peoria go away. Another is to read the contract and figure out, what are our options and claim those 90 days or at least 60. I don't want to hold anything up for Alex Greaves, the current owner. He was not looking to sell the boat. He's had a couple of rough years because of COVID. And if somebody came to me with $1 million, or I don't even know what the price is, but an exceptional deal, I would consider it. But the Spirit of Peoria really is the core of this heart of this town. As I've been sitting here listening to the machinations of government and admiring this beautiful mural, what ties that mural together? It's the river. Peoria has always been a river town. It's been inhabited by Native Americans for thousands of years because of the river. If you look at the lumber in this room, much of it was brought here by riverboat. The cupola in that painting and the stone from St. Mary's Cathedral was brought here by riverboats. We were the whiskey capital of the world because of riverboats. Liberty Street, right down the hill here, is named for the first riverboat that landed here. And when the Liberty steamboat landed, Peoria was little more than Fort Clark and a series of houses. And within 5 years of the first riverboat, the town multiplied by 10 in its population. Peoria is built as a riverboat town. 30 years ago, when the Julia Bell Swain left, it was a huge loss. And the Spirit of Peoria was built to replace the Julia Bell. And when this fell into the city's hands, I believe that clause was put, the right of first refusal, to prevent the boat from leaving. Other people will speak more articulately, with more detail over the next few weeks and months about the economic impact, about tourism, but knowing that millions of dollars a year comes to Peoria because of the boat. I can't say I moved here exclusively because of the boat, but I got a job on the boat before I moved here. And I've been working for the boat for 30 years. And have met people from all over the world who come here because of the Spirit of Peoria. And we launched a petition. We printed a paper copy on our way to the meeting. And I agree with Madam Clerk, it doesn't need to be reproduced for everybody. But just during this meeting, we've garnished another 150 signatures. And reading through the comments, which I'll highly recommend you do, it's all available online. Of course, when you open it to social media, you have a few knuckleheads. But 99% of the comments are in favor of the boat. So with my last minute, I'd like to put maybe another proposal. As an act of civic pride, much like the Green Bay Packers, instead of the city owning the boat, you create an opportunity for the people of Peoria to purchase the boat. That you set up some kind of shares where at $100 a share, limiting people to 10 shares, so it's truly owned by the community, I am sure you could raise the money to not only match the price that has been offered, but put some money in the bank because the boat will need repairs. And I, for one, would be willing to buy some of those shares. And I would also assume that most of the people who do, if they got, because we're going to run it for profit, it made profit and survived COVID, it made a profit and survived the economic downturn, most people would reinvest in the boat. If I got $5 a year off my shares, I'd probably buy my grandson a ticket with that money. And it would really be the heart of the city. So just to begin the conversation, I hope you'll consider keeping the Spirit of Peoria here.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Kim Thrush. Ms. Thrush.
Hi, I'm Kim Thrush. I'm wife of Brian Fox Ellis and daughter of Jim Thrush, who did a lot of restoration, the Prairie building downtown. I think one of the things I wanted to share with you what's special about the Spirit of Peoria that you're not going to get anywhere else is, that I think is important, that the riverboats on the Mississippi generally will dock at a port for the day so people can go out and explore, and then they travel on the river at night. And the Spirit of Peoria travels on the river by day and pulls in the port at night, so that you really get to understand the river. My husband's telling stories and telling all kinds of information. So people feel really connected to that, and things that would be difficult to try to, research all that before. So it's such a connector for people for the river, which I think helps people care about the river. And I would say the river is healthier now than it was 30 years ago, and I would think the riverboat would be able to help it in 30 years to be even more healthier. And the other point I wanted to make is the tourism dollars that come in from the Spirit of Peoria, that they have tons of bus groups and all their trips, and even our business, which is, we live in Bishop Hill now, we get people who come and spend a couple extra days before their trip to make it a more diverse stay. And so I hope it would be so sad to me if the Spirit of Peoria riverboat wasn't part of Peoria, because I just think it's important for Peoria, and it's important for the rest of our country, for people who come and get that experience.
Thank you, Ms. Thrush. Barry Cloyd, Mr. Cloyd.
Thank you, Mayor Ali and City Council, for allowing us to speak. I have to agree with my colleagues here. We all have a deep, deep connection to not only the city, but the reason the city is here. And as Fox so eloquently put it, the reason the city is here is pictured right on that mural there. It is the river. If this river weren't here, most likely we wouldn't be at all. It brought people here. It has been the focus of a community built here from the first days of the Native Americans, nearly 15,000 years ago. It's a very good place to live. And the reason is the river. It's plain and simple. That's the reason that we are here. And in order to celebrate that, it's almost imperative that we as a community think of just how important that boat is. It's a lot more than just a name on the back of a big boat, the Spirit of Peoria. That is part of the literal spirit of this town. I've been associated as a full-time musician with that boat for 22 years, and I have had the privilege of introducing this community and this area and this beautiful, beautiful river valley to literally thousands of people in that time. And many of those people never heard of this place until they went online and they looked for a Mississippi riverboat trip. And it just so happens that Spirit of Peoria, we spend a lot of time, not only on the Illinois River, we spend a lot of time on the Mississippi River as well. And this gave people from all over the world, literally, the chance to experience this area and leave a lot of their dollars behind. This is not only a soulful decision to keep this boat here. It's an extremely important monetary decision, and more importantly, I think it's a quality of life decision. When you look, when you or anyone else looks to move into an area, what's the first thing you do? You go online and you look at what are things to do. What are things to do in that area? Because you want to be able to entertain your family. You want to be able to have a good time. You want to be able to go out and see things like the symphony and theater and all of the wonderful musical pieces that people can go visit. You also want to be able to enjoy the outdoors, and that is one of the most beautiful ways to do that is on that riverboat. I won't continue to go on and on tonight, but you hear the passion. And that's the way a lot of people, we're nearly 2,500 signatures on that petition that was started 5 days ago. And that's just a fraction. Just think of that's just people who know people who know people. That's not the general populace even expressing their opinion. And you know darn well that once those people go down to that river and they don't see that riverboat sitting there, they're going to wonder what the heck is going on with this town. Peoria is a wonderful place to live. This river valley is a wonderful place to live. It always has been. That's why we're here, folks. And, you know, many songwriters have put our feelings about this kind of thing into songs that have lasted and continued on and left us with some powerful messages. And one of the best, in my opinion, was penned by an incredible songwriter, one of my heroes, a lady by the name of Joni Mitchell. She put it very succinctly like this: "Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone?" Thank you very much for your time. Please consider strongly keeping that riverboat here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd. James Lemon. Mr. Lemon.
My name is Ted Lehman, and I'm the youngest employee on the riverboat. Believe it or not. I've been a regular piano player for about 7 or 8 years. I shared the duties with a guy named Ken Bradbury, who passed away 3 or 4 years ago. Now I had all the work. I was supposed to have about 40 days coming up this summer on the boat until I got a call Friday from the owner who said there was an agreement already in place, and unless the city stopped the sale and stepped forward to somehow buy the boat, that it would steam off to some other port. I think the company's from Tampa, and the captain told me that they also bought the Julia Bell Swain, which is up in La Crosse. It used to be here for repair or for display, I don't know. In any event, before I was the piano player on the boat, I brought busloads of people here because I originated the World Championship old-time piano playing contest, which was in this town after we left Decatur when there was a management change at the Holiday Inn. We came to Decatur to the Pier Marquette. We were there for over a decade until they decided to renovate the hotel. We moved down to the Sheraton 5 Points. We were there 2 years, and they decided to renovate the hotel. So we went to the Embassy Suites for 2 years, and the prices kept going up. Our people were getting tired. A couple of our board members had passed away. I'm only 76, but we also had some old ones. And so the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss, took over the piano contest. It's still going on. It'll be our first edition in 3 years because of the pandemic. But through the thousands of people that the boat has attracted through the years, not only from people like myself who brought busloads or who ran an event like our Friday luncheon cruise with 18 piano players on 2 decks and people lining up to play the Calliope on the top. But one of the people on the boat is sitting right over here, Debbie's the cook, chef. So she knows that besides the jobs that will be lost if the boat moves, all of the commodities they buy, the fuel, the liquor, the food to provide to customers, arranging the hotel rooms. A lot of these people come in the night before, and they're at the Mark Twain, or they're on their bus tour, and they're at one of the big hotels, and they get dropped off in the morning. No cars, no nothing. They just arrive and spend millions of dollars here over the last 30 years. It would be a shame, with the answer in hand on how to do it, if we didn't have at least 60 days or so to come up with a plan, maybe like Brian proposed, or maybe some rich guys in town will put it up, or maybe the city will buy it and let us buy it off of you back over 5 years or something. But why lose millions of dollars in income and jobs to some degree and purchases of commodities? So nothing's going to be decided tonight, although, as Brian mentioned, you could probably waive the right of the city to, just pass it up. We hope. We've only had 4 days to work on this project. And so far we have 2,500 people or so that are interested in in making sure that the spirit of Peoria stays in Peoria. 3,000. My God, let's get $1 from each of them.
Thank you, Mr. Lemon. Skylar Newell? Mr. Newell?
Mayor Ali, City Council. My name is Skylar, 27 years old. The spirit of Peoria has been here my whole life, and I enjoy riding on it. The main reason I wanted to stay in Peoria, it makes a lot of income. And during the summer, when they have the trips, a lot of people come in from out of town just to ride the boat. And as my fellow friends here said, it's a fun trip to go on, and it makes plenty of money. And I'm really hoping with you, Mayor Ali, and City Council, that you guys will vote on to keep the boat here in Peoria.
Thank you. Is Sherry Wynn here? Sherry Wynn? Okay, that concludes the citizens' comments, Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk.
We will be adjourning into executive session.
Council?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We need an executive session pursuant to 5 ILCS 120-2C5, the purchase or lease of property, 2C6, the setting the lease price of property, and 2C21 to review closed session minutes.
Excuse me, motion to adjourn. Councilmember Ruckriegel, seconded by Councilmember, who was that? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Sear? Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for your service.